Here's a sneak peek of today's episode.
Because when I first heard ABM, what I really thought about that was I'm going to pick one company. I'm going to go after Wells Fargo or something. And I'm going to create this huge, massive campaign. It's going to be super personalized and excellent. And that's cool. And that's definitely something that you could do. What we have been doing, at least to start with, is more like a one-to-many and a one-to-few. So those are the three tiers: one-to-many, one-to-few, and one-to-one. And anytime we kick off a campaign, we kind of run it in a pilot. So it's like 3 months and that's it. And in a one-to-many, we're maybe picking like 100 companies, something like that. In a one-to-few, we're picking maybe like 15. And then a one-to-one obviously is one.
Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Kristiane. Kristiane, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to see you all.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. This is going to be a fun discussion, but before we dive in, let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us about your career, some of your background, and then also we love to ask, what do you love about content and marketing?
I am VP of Growth at Praxent. So we're a tech consulting and engineering firm for financial services companies. I've been at that company for about 6 years now, and I've moved around a lot since being in that company. I actually started out initially as the executive assistant to the CEO, and then I was in sales, and then I was in marketing, and then I was in marketing, then I was in sales, and now I'm in marketing again, and kind of sitting over both a little bit, or touching both a little bit, I guess. So yeah, that's, I guess, a little bit about me. You asked about what I love about content marketing. I think the piece that I love personally about doing of content marketing is that because we're working in financial services, so that means we're across banking and lending and wealth management and insurance, there's so many different areas within that I get to kind of do a bunch of research into and really understand what is happening in this particular industry right now, and trying to figure out how that's impacting them and creating content that specifically solves that problem or speaks to that problem. That's probably my favorite thing about it, is just kind of getting into understanding how different businesses work all the time.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, Kristiane, I'm excited. We're going to have a discussion today about account-based marketing, ABM. And what's fascinating, we were talking a little bit before we started recording, ABM a year ago compared to today, this would be a very different discussion. It's a fascinating element with technology and everything going on. So before we dive into the nitty-gritty details of ABM, really quick, what's your definition of ABM? I think that there's a million different definitions that people have. Some people may associate it only with specific software solutions. Others, it's a strategy and a framework. How do you look at it? What's kind of your definition of ABM?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us, the way that we're approaching ABM is firstly in terms of like just the way that we organize how we market, and doing that based on having a list of accounts. So we work in fairly niche market, just in financial services. So it's not difficult for me to be able to create a list of every company that fits our ICP within insurance, and every single list that fits that within banking or fintech. And so that we get to this place of like, okay, here's the couple thousand companies that we can actually work with. And then you start to be able to look at it from, okay, I'm going to target these companies with content and with sales in this sort of omnichannel approach. And I can very much now see what percentage of that market am I actually engaging and are actually engaging with me. And it just really focuses, for me at least. But when I think of that, because when I first heard ABM, what I really thought about that was I'm going to pick one company. I'm going to go after Wells Fargo or something. And I'm going to create this huge, massive campaign. It's going to be super personalized and excellent. And that's cool. And that's definitely something that you could do. What we have been doing, at least to start with, is more like a one-to-many and a one-to-few. So those are the three tiers: one-to-many, one-to-few, and one-to-one. And anytime we kick off a campaign, we kind of run it in a pilot. So it's like 3 months and that's it. And in a one-to-many, we're maybe picking like 100 companies, something like that. In a one-to-few, we're picking maybe like 15, and then a one-to-one obviously is one. And so we are mostly focusing on that one-to-many and one-to-few, and how can we create little like niches within our group of accounts And really, other than that, my definition of ABM is just go after them in any way you can. Just make sure it's consistent. Make sure you are reaching out to them. The amount of time that you're reaching out to them probably changes a little bit. In a one-to-many, probably like once a week, once every 2 weeks, something like that. In a one-to-few, it's kind of like once every 3 days is kind of what we're targeting. But yeah, that's kind of my definition, at least, of a ABM campaign and how you can approach it. And I think that, like, from the technology as well, like you mentioned, there's so many different technology companies out there, and I think there's a difference of whether you're trying to pull companies to you or whether you're pushing a message to very intentional companies. Personally, I prefer to push my message to the companies that I want to reach to. And a lot of the technology is really set up to pull them. And maybe that just might be because there are companies that can sell to much wider audience than we can, but there's only so many companies in that we can sell to in financial services. So that's the other way I kind of think about it.
I love that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So obviously when you're pushing your message to these businesses, and you mentioned this kind of golden word, another word that I'd kind of love to have you define, omnichannel. You know, obviously it denotes that there's a lot of different channels, things like that. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, your definition of ABM is we have targeted lists of accounts. And I love your numbers, by the way. One to many being 100, I think is golden. You know, I think a lot of people say one to many for us is like 5,000, 10,000. It's really hard to have a targeted campaign with that many people. So I love that your numbers are a lot more realistic. But when you're talking about omni-channel and really ABM, it sounds like, okay, we have our targeted list of accounts. So we're focusing on the accounts, not the channels, where a lot of other people focus on the channels as opposed to the accounts. How do you push out that message using omni-channel? Do you have to use specialized technology? How does that kind of function and flow? How do you really manage that?
Yeah. So at the beginning of any campaign, the first thing I start by thinking of is like the touch points, which is actually like the content or the things that we're going to do. So I don't know, the first touch point might just be like, hey, we created this new landing page for you. I'm then just taking that one asset that I've created, this landing page, and like reusing it in multiple different ways. And that's how I end up in an omni-channel strategy. So, we will send them a marketing email. We'll probably send them a sales email. We might do a sales call. We may do a LinkedIn message about it. We will probably do an ad that's targeting that landing page. We'll do a social media post about it. And that's then we're sort of hitting them in multiple different mediums over the course of about 2 weeks or so, with that same message, just like, hey, we made them a landing page. And then the next one is maybe, hey, we wrote this article on whatever. Same thing, just going through it in a variety of different ways. And there are like, that's where you then start being the further you go in and the bigger that content piece becomes, because we kind of start with something lighter and like less valuable, like a landing page, and then a LinkedIn post, and then you maybe get to a case study and you're just taking them down the funnel, right? And then maybe we get to an ebook or a white paper. And maybe we get to an event is the other piece. And that's how we then start pulling in other stuff. So when we get to the white paper, maybe we pick off the, 20 people who have engaged the most in our campaign. They've been clicking a lot, or they've maybe responded to sales in a little way, or whatever it is. And maybe we send that to them direct mail. Direct mail is massive, I think, as a huge opportunity. We had huge success. One of the campaigns we just launched, sending a bunch of direct mail to people prior to a conference. And we had people coming up to us at the conference saying like, hey, all of my colleagues just got this like thing in their mail to their home address. And they said, I just have to come and speak to you and stuff. So when you like pull all of these different strategies in and they're just getting like consistent, I think consistency is the other piece of it. You have to do it like frequent touches and assume it's going to probably take 6 touches just for one piece of content for that person to even see it. That's what I mean by omnichannel. And you make sure that you have ads kind of like floating over the top almost, but everything is contributing to one. The place where I will say you find the most like actual conversions of people though is in the sales channel, because the way I'm talking about things is a little bit different. Like in marketing, I'm more trying to like inform them, educate them, like just position us as thought leaders and experts in it. And in sales, they're much more focused on like, hey, here are the 3 ways that I think we could like actually help you in your use case. And that obviously is going to be the piece that kind of converts. It's just about making sure you've got value to add to them so that when sales then comes in with a more like hard message or a more direct message, rather, it's not out of the blue. They've heard of us already.
I love that. So that's such a cool element. I want to kind of double click on the sales side of things because you've had this really cool experience marketing to sales to marketing and all of that kind of crossover experience. You mentioned like, hey, here are all the channels that we're using to outreach, and sales was a channel for the outreach. I think a lot of times in marketing will do a lot of effort. They're expected to generate leads. They throw those over the fence and then they expect sales to kind of take it from there. ABM, there's this inherent collaboration piece that really allows sales to be almost a marketing channel for some of this. How do you collaborate and really make sure your ABM is in line with sales and that you're reaching out at the right times? How do you use that channel?
Yeah. So what I'll say is I think of this as maturity. And so the first things that we were doing were really pilot campaigns to just prove out the concept of it. And when we were doing those, it was very small, very targeted. And I told sales exactly what to do. I said, hey, I set them tasks. I use HubSpot. So I set them tasks in HubSpot, like 3 days from then, send them a sales email. This is the message that I want you to send. Like, this is not the exact message. This is the directional message that I want you to send. There's this piece of content that I would like you to focus on. Here's, in advance of doing all of this, I spent a lot of time going through and researching the specific subset industry that we were focusing on and creating a messaging mix for them. And then I created all of the different touch points that we're going to do. So like, here are the 12 pieces of content that we're going to create, and here's how we're going to send them out. And then I went through that with sales, like one by one, each thing. Like, they're going to get a marketing email, and then they're going to do this, and then they're going to whatever. And you're going to send them this sales email at this time about the landing page and how we can help them. And like, here's that. And so we're giving them a lot of direction in terms of here's what we want you to say. And when we want you to say it. And that worked really well. And I think especially as we were just kind of proving out the concept and making sure everybody was familiar with what we were supposed to be doing, that was a great way to start. Where I'm getting to now is using that a little bit more in the one to few kind of size. And then where we get to the one to many, giving them a little bit more flexibility. And at that point, you get more into sort of RevOps and how do we make sure that we have workflows set up so that sales knows exactly what to do when we say that, hey, there's this person and they're showing intent. Where are they in the funnel, and how does that impact how you target them or what you say to them? And a lot of that work is honestly just defining, like, what would the ideal flow be if somebody, I don't know, reaches out to book a link on the website or book a meeting on the website and then kind of ghosts us? Like, what's the best way that we could like get them back in touch? Or if they clicked on our website 10 times and they keep going to it and they spent 15 minutes on it, but they didn't necessarily do anything. What's the best way that we can really what we're trying to do is just push them down the funnel and get them into a conversation with us. And so it just kind of takes a little bit of defining, but you still have to, for those campaigns, we still have to go through and review with sales. Like, here's the messaging, here's the research. Actually, more than anything is here's the research that we did. Here's what we found. And this is why we know that this message is going to be valuable to them so that they understand it. Because I think if you, that like throwing it over the fence of like, we've done a bunch of research and we understand what's going on, and now like off to sales you go, and you don't give sales any of that context, they're researching something else. They're finding their own things. And so if you can make sure that you're like sharing context as much as possible with sales, then it just aligns that message so much more.
I love that. So these podcast episodes go by quick. So we're almost out of time. One final question, and this is very specific. It's a little bit of a curveball. I loved how you broke down the different phases, one-to-one, one-to-many, one-to-one, one-to-few, one-to-many. When you have a one-to-many or one-to-few, do they always narrow down? Like if you have a one-to-many and it's 100 accounts, do you always take like the top, engagement ones and make a separate one-to-few campaign and then from there do one-to-one? Or are you typically only doing that for like maybe the people that didn't get your desired outcome? How do you kind of narrow down everything from there?
Yeah. So right now, the way we've kind of organized it, whether we prioritize people for those campaigns, initially we just did it on who are the most ideal customers, like who do we want to sell to the most? And based on that, we just put a little bit extra effort into those ones by like customizing their assets with I don't know, maybe we did a use case or something and we put their logo on it. And then with a one-to-one, it was very similar as well, but just much more targeted to that. And for the one-to-one campaign that we did, we actually just prioritized one of our existing clients that we wanted to expand into so that we could grow that one. But what I think we're going to get to, though, is a mix, really. Hopefully in the one-to-manys that we kick off, sales is going to be able to kind of do some proving out some concepts for us of, hey, like which subset of these are the most engaging or engaging the most, or can we learn something from? And then based on that, we're then pulling those groups into those one-to-fews and running very niche campaigns. In general, my goal is to pick companies that I have the same thing to say to all of them. So if I as a salesperson was going to send them all a message at a conference or whatever, like, would I say the same thing to all of them? And if the answer is yes to that, then that's a great segment for a one-to-few, because it means we can get really targeted with that message. And I'm not having to like do that much customization to it. Most of the customization then really just falls to the sales team to look at, like, I don't know, this person just changed jobs or something. So like, I should say something about that. And so really all the customization from the marketing side kind of becomes about, outside of just creating that campaign, it really just comes about like, let's just change the assets so they're more personalized. And there's a lot of technology and that can help with that. And that's one of the things that we're kind of working on exploring now, is how we can drive more personalization at scale versus us designing everything. We're lucky. We've got a very scrappy team that gets it done very, very quickly. But I'd like to get some more scale for that. So that's kind of our next step. But I love it, Christian.
That's so cool. I love that. Well, there has been so much information that is so insightful. I love your approach to ABM. I love your approach in marketing in general and how you collaborate with sales and really the exploratory. I love that you're doing trial campaigns before you launch bigger ones. That's honestly in my career something I haven't seen very much at all of, and I think it's a really good practice. So Kristiane, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. If anyone wants to reach out and continue the conversation with you, how and where do they find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can always send me a message from there.
Perfect. Anyone listening to this podcast, we will have Kristiane's information in the show notes, and you'll be able to click a link directly to connect with her on LinkedIn. Kristiane, again, thank you so much for the time, the insights, and everything today. Really appreciate it.
So thanks so much, Ben.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.